Welcome to season 1 of the Alcohol-Free HSP Podcast, where embodied education meets holistic lifestyle for highly sensitive people in their wellness journey through sobriety. I am your host, Gretchen Bergantine, HSP coach and mentor, wellness educator, lifestyle influencer, mom, wife, and 3 years happily alcohol-free. Whether you're newly sober curious, or years into your sobriety, this podcast is here to give you the truth about alcohol, the research surrounding high sensitivity, and tools to build confidence in a sustainable lifestyle as you discover what's possible when you stop numbing your high sensitivity with alcohol, nurture your nervous system, and start living the life you're really craving. So grab a cup of coffee or mix up a mocktail and let's get started. Welcome to episode 1, where today I share my story through sensitivity and sobriety and tell you where I was and how I got to where I am today. I grew up in Wisconsin in a log house in the woods. My parents actually still live there, and I had a wonderful, beautiful childhood and upbringing. And my childhood dream was to move to Los Angeles and dress the movie stars. And I set out at the young, ripe age of 21, and I made that dream come true. I actually got to be on an episode of Friends, but we'll save that for another podcast episode. I married at the age of 25. I bought my first home, and I had my son at the age of 30. And when my son was about 7 months old, I became a single mom literally overnight and was a single mom for 8 years until I eventually remarried. And those years being a single mom really brought out a lot of, looking back, a lot of really dangerous drinking habits. Because, I was doing the work of 2 people and I felt that I deserved this reward at the end of the night with my nightly wine. And that really started to amplify and, turn into a problematic relationship that I had developed with alcohol. I recently celebrated 3 years sober this July, and my journey with sensitivity and alcohol really started in 2020 when I started on a massive spiritual awakening, and I started to look at my life and the patterns that I was doing and really started to wake up to not only what was happening in the world, but also what was happening in my rich inner world. And my mom had come out to visit me to help with my son while we were on lockdown. He was home from school and I was still working. I worked retail. And my mom and I were talking about how we're so sensitive and how stimulation and overwhelm and how we need a lot of downtime and how crowds can bother us and loud noises and shopping carts and all the things. And she went back to Wisconsin, and you know how our smartphones listen to us? Well, a YouTube video popped up with a TED Talk, and it immediately caught her attention. It said highly sensitive person. And so she watched it. It was a quick, 15, 20-minute video. And she sent it to me and she said, Gretchen, the thing that we were talking about is actually a thing. There is a thing called highly sensitive people. And so I immediately watched the video and I had so many emotions come over me. I was relieved, most of all. I was excited. I was curious. I was all the things, all of the feelings, the good, the bad, everything in between. But mostly I was relieved because I started to understand my life and that there was this thing that really did exist, these highly sensitive people. And I will give a quick overview about the trait of high sensitivity today, but in the next episode, I am going to go into what it means to be a highly sensitive person, a little bit more about that. It is also known as sensory processing sensitivity, and it is not a disorder or a disease. And it affects 20 to actually, they're finding out now more in research, more around 30% of the population. And it's not just women. 50% are men, 50% are women. And you can head to my website for more information. And I'll also put a quiz link in the show notes so that you can see if you identify with the trait. But highly sensitive people, we are a unique breed. And what's interesting about this day that she sent me this TED talk was it was about a year later where I realized that I was drinking a beer that Sunday morning at around 11 a.m. when she sent me that TED talk. And when I made that connection, I got scared and I felt so many things. I realized that I started to understand my journey and myself even more. And I thought, okay, I'm onto something here. I'm onto something personally, and how many more people that are highly sensitive people are using alcohol to numb their high sensitivity or numb past traumas or events. And when I started to get curious about that, everything started to make sense for me. I had developed a lot of health struggles. I was always a very active and healthy person. I've always worked out. I've done triathlons. Was a gym rat at the young age of 17. And so I've always been an active, healthy person. I've always ate really well, but I started to develop these really problematic symptoms. And this was around, my early 40s. And I started to connect my gut health issues, my histamine intolerance, my anxiety. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, what's the correlation between this? Now, mind you, this is also the time when a woman enters perimenopause, which is, around the late 30s, early 40s. And I really started to make that connection and I started to identify my root causes. And I guess you could call it a rock bottom moment, but it was more of I can't keep living like this and I don't want to keep living like this. And so the night before I actually quit drinking, I had promised myself I wouldn't drink again after many numerous failed attempts to try to quit. And I was watching my Real Housewives shows. I love reality TV. And it was my guilty pleasure. It was what I did at night. It was my reward to myself. My son would go to sleep and I would watch my show and drink my wine. And it was the night before that I drank too much Chardonnay and I woke up the next morning and I was in full blown panic, full blown anxiety. And like I said, I got scared and I even recorded a video of myself and I watch it and I still like get goosebumps that this was actually me because I started to become unrecognizable to myself. I would look in the mirror and I wouldn't recognize myself. And I was just sick of living this way. And, no DUIs, no dramatic stories, no park bench situations, no, anything that society would label as a drinking problem. But for me, I was driving myself crazy. And I said, I have got to figure out what's going on with me and why I'm doing this. And so what started as innocent fun in my 20s then turned into my new normal in my 30s, which then became functioning dependency in my 40s with my alcohol. And I grew up with parents very aware of our genetic, predisposition for what used to be called alcoholism. It's now referred to as alcohol use disorder. And so I was very aware of the dangers of it. My mom was very intentional about saying, we have to be careful. This is in our gene pool. And it was almost like my soul knew that this was going to be an issue for me because I really distinctly remember here and can still hear her voice talking about the dangers of alcohol. But yet I fell into this trap, right? That's what we do. It traps us. That's what it's designed to do, to kill, steal, and destroy. And I got really curious. I got really curious about who I was as a woman, as a highly sensitive woman, what that looked like for me, how I needed to look at my life and maybe make the changes so that I didn't desire or need the alcohol to calm down from an overstimulating day. And I was working retail. I had worked retail many years, off and on in my adult life. And this particular time in my life, I was at a women's boutique here in Orange County. Wonderful job. I had a team of girls, of college girls that helped me. And I was a buyer, I was the manager, I was the hiring manager, I was the sales girl, I was the social media girl. Like I did it all. And because of that overstimulating environment that is retail and that is the pressures of managing other people, and those reasons were why I was also turning to alcohol, because on a subconscious level, my nervous system was fried. I was in perimenopause, this was COVID, so there was all of that, and my spiritual awakening journey and just this self-discovery, this whole like journey of self-discovery is really what I had found myself on. And looking back, there's part of me that doesn't really even remember some of that time in my life, because I've gone through so much growth and healing and so much of this spiritual awakening, that it's almost like just this old version of me has there's this death and rebirth, and that's where I'm at today. So I got really curious about my drinking. I made the choice and made the decision once and for all to like stop and just take a day at a time and understand why. Like the biggest thing for me is understanding why I was doing it. And once I got clear on why I was doing it and also why I wanted to quit drinking, that's when everything changed for me. And so it was this domino effect and this stack of moments and events and aha moments and uncovering this and realizing that and discovering that and putting it all together, which is why now I have turned my mess into a message and my pain into my purpose. And I help other highly sensitive people in their wellness journey to help them break free from alcohol. And really, the root cause of a lot of the reasons why we drink is as highly sensitive people, we have a nervous system that is more finely tuned than those non-HSP. So in a world that is non-HSP friendly, that we're constantly getting bombarded with messages and, the toxins in our food and the stuff in our water and the stuff in our air and all of the things, we start to realize, we really have to protect our sensitive nervous system. And that is why my approach to drinking is that of a wellness approach. It's understanding what our needs are as highly sensitive people and how they look different from others. Because the root cause of drinking for me was my nervous system, and why I was choosing to do this vicious cycle of, okay, you're overstimulated, so you drink, and then that even floods the system more with toxins. So then you drink even more. And then the next day you feel even worse. And it's just this constant vicious cycle. So that is what I do. That is where I am today. I I really love the fact that there is more research coming out about the trait of high sensitivity and how it relates to alcohol. There's not a lot of concrete evidence at this time, but I know people that are working on this in their PhD. They're working on the correlation between high sensitivity and alcohol. And myself and others and other psychologists have also identified that there definitely is a link between high sensitivity and alcohol use, because we're turning to that because of our emotional overwhelm. We turn to something outside of us, such as alcohol, and that can lead to a dependent relationship. So, how I work with people is I have a signature course, actually, really the foundational course, which is called Stop Numbing the Foundation. And that is the first like 7 to 10 days of highly sensitive women in their journey in breaking free from alcohol. There's no rules, there's no perfectionism. We drop that shit, we leave it at the door, because we already struggle with perfectionism and people pleasing as highly sensitive women. And this is a safe space where we just lay it all down. We look at the foundation of why we're drinking, why we want to quit, and how we can build our lives on that strong foundation while understanding the trait of high sensitivity and how that fits into our drinking behaviors and patterns. Um, and then I have my signature course, which is called Stop Numbing, Start Living. And that is where we take a deep dive into a little bit more about the trait of high sensitivity and ways that you can regulate your nervous system and ways for you to, um, have something inside of you that you don't need to reach for something outside of you, such as alcohol. So that's what Stop Numbing, Start Living is. That is self-paced. That's a 30-day course. And again, no perfectionism, no, nothing is needed as far as judgment. It's a safe space. I have a community within the Alcohol-Free HSP called the Sanctuary, where we can come together and just, kind of talk about life and the stage of life that we're in with hormones, with, being mothers and partners and balancing life and work and all of the things. So that is where I'm at today. I would love to hear more from you. If you have questions, you can absolutely send me a direct message. I would love it if you would share this episode with another person so that they can find relief in their journey. And yeah, reach out with any questions, and I look forward to connecting with you.